A poor rancher risked his life to save a wounded native woman, only to face her tribe's judgment at dawn. But what they found in his cabin shocked everyone. The year was 1872, and the Wyoming frontier was a place that chewed up good men and spit out their bones. Jacob was a man who knew this better than most. At 30, he lived alone on a patch of dry land that fought him for every blade of grass. His cabin was small, his cattle were few, and his heart was a hollowed-out thing. He'd lost his wife and son to the fever 2 years back. Now his only companions were the wind and the ghosts of what might have been. One evening, as the sun bled out across the horizon, he was riding the riverbank, looking for a stray calf. That's when he saw her. She was lying at the water's edge, half in the mud, her buckskin dress torn and dark with blood. She was young, maybe 25, and she was dying. But she wasn't alone. Clutched to her chest, wrapped in a small blanket, was a baby. The rancher's horse shied away, its eyes wide with fear. The air was thick with the smell of violence. Broken arrows stuck out of the ground around her. She hadn't just been attacked. She'd made a stand. For her child. Any smart man would have turned and ridden away. Getting involved with the tribe's business was a death sentence. But Jacob wasn't thinking about being smart. He was thinking about the small, silent bundle in her arms. He slid from his saddle, his boots sinking into the cold mud. He knelt beside her. The wound in her side was deep, a nasty gash from a knife. But she was still breathing. He tore a strip from his own shirt and pressed it hard against the wound. "Hold on," he whispered. "You're not alone." He lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. The baby let out a tiny mewling cry. He laid her gently across his horse, then climbed up behind, holding them both steady against his chest. The ride back to his cabin was the longest of his life. The wind felt like it was trying to rip them from the saddle. Every hoofbeat was a prayer. He got them inside, laid her on his bed, and put the baby in a wooden crate packed with his old wool shirts. He stoked the fire until the small cabin was blazing with heat. He worked for hours, cleaning the wound, stitching it closed with a fishing hook and thread, whispering words of encouragement she couldn't hear. He was no doctor, but he knew how to keep things alive in this harsh land. As midnight came and went, her breathing steadied. The baby, fed with a few precious drops of goat's milk, slept peacefully. Jacob sank into his chair, exhaustion hitting him like a physical blow. He had no idea who she was or what tribe she belonged to. He only knew that her people would come looking for her, and when they found a white man with their wounded woman, they wouldn't ask questions. But as he looked at the mother and child, bathed in the soft firelight, he felt a flicker of something he thought was long dead. Hope. He didn't know it yet, but the men who had attacked her weren't just raiders. They had been sent by a man who wanted something she had, and they were coming back to finish the job. Dawn broke, and with it came the sound of thunder. Not from the sky, from the earth. The ground trembled with the drumming of 100 hooves. Jacob stepped out onto his porch, his heart a cold stone in his chest. Warriors. They crested the ridge like a storm surge, a wave of painted faces in lethal intent. They surrounded the cabin in a silent, deadly circle, spears and rifles held at the ready. Their leader, a tall, grim-faced man with the authority of a king, dismounted. His eyes, hard as obsidian, locked onto Jacob. He was the chief, and his face was a mask of cold fury. Jacob stood his ground, his hands empty at his sides. His rifle was inside, but it would be useless against so many. This was it. This was how it ended. The chief advanced, each step slow and deliberate. His hand rested on the handle of a tomahawk at his belt. "You have taken what is not yours." The chief's voice was low, dangerous. "You have touched the daughter of Black Eagle." The chief's daughter. Jacob's blood ran cold. He'd saved royalty, and in their eyes that made his crime even worse. "I saved her life," Jacob said, his own voice steady, though his insides were shaking. Black Eagle's eyes narrowed. He did not believe him. He raised his hand, a signal to his warriors. Bowstrings were drawn, rifles were cocked. But then a different voice cut through the tension, weak but clear. "He speaks the truth, my father." The woman stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame for support. She was wrapped in one of Jacob's old blankets. Her face was pale, but her eyes were clear. Black Eagle turned, his expression shifting from fury to stunned relief. He rushed to his daughter's side, speaking to her in their own tongue. She answered, her voice gaining strength, her hand gesturing toward Jacob. Then she looked at Jacob, and for the first time, he saw her smile. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. Black Eagle turned back to him. The fury in his eyes was gone, replaced by a deep, searching curiosity. "You fought for her?" he asked. Jacob shook his head. "I did what any man should." "Few men would," the chief said. He looked at Jacob's humble cabin, his small herd of cattle. "You are a poor man. I have what I need." "You have honor," Black Eagle corrected. He held out his hand. "My daughter's name is Naya. Her son is Little Hawk. And you are a friend to our people." Jacob took the chief's hand. The standoff was over, or so he thought. That evening they sat around a great fire. The tribe had made camp near his cabin. For the first time in 2 years, Jacob wasn't alone. He was surrounded by people, by life. Naya sat beside her father, her son in her arms. She told the story, not of random raiders, but of white men. Men from the Sutton Ranch, the big, greedy operation that was swallowing up the valley. They were trying to force her tribe off their ancestral lands. They had tried to take her son, the chief's grandson, as a hostage. She had fought them off, but not before being wounded. As she spoke, Jacob saw something that made him freeze. One of the younger warriors was staring at him, his eyes filled with a venomous hatred that had not disappeared with the chief's friendship. This warrior was Kale. He had wanted Naya for his own. He saw Jacob not as a savior, but as a rival, a white man who had touched the woman he desired. Later that night, as the camp slept, Kyle came to Jacob's cabin. "She will never be yours," Kyle hissed from the darkness. "You are a ghost. You do not belong here." Before Jacob could respond, Kyle was gone. The next morning, Black Eagle approached him, his face grim. "3 of my warriors are dead, their throats cut in the night." Jacob's blood ran cold. The scene was staged to look like the work of a white man, a knife, not a tomahawk. It was Kale. He was trying to frame Jacob, to reignite the war, and it was working. The warriors were stirring, their suspicion returning, their hands once again on their weapons. Black Eagle looked at him, his face torn. "I do not want to believe this of you, but my people demand justice." Jacob was trapped, accused of a murder he didn't commit, by a man who would see him dead and the whole valley burned to get what he wanted. Black Eagle held up a hand for silence. He looked from Jacob's steady gaze to Kale's simmering hatred. "There is a way to find the truth," the chief said. "The way of our ancestors. Trial by combat." A gasp went through the tribe. Kale smiled, a predator's smile. He was younger, faster, a trained warrior. Jacob was a rancher. It was a death sentence. "If the spirits are with you," Black Eagle said to Jacob, his voice heavy with regret, "you will live. If you are guilty, you will die. The judgment will be made at sunrise." Jacob looked at Naya. He saw the terror in her eyes. She knew what Kale was capable of. She knew this was a lie, but she was powerless to stop it. As the sun began to rise, casting a bloody light across the snow, the 2 men faced each other in a circle of warriors. Kale held 2 long, wicked-looking knives. Jacob had only the simple skinning knife from his belt. The fight was brutal and short. Kale was a whirlwind of flashing steel. Jacob was on the defensive, barely parrying the blows, his feet slipping in the mud and snow. He was outmatched. It was only a matter of time. Kyle lunged, his blade slicing Jacob's arm. Jacob stumbled back, pain shooting through him. Kyle moved in for the kill, but as he raised his knife for the final blow, a small object flew through the air and struck him hard on the temple. It was a rock, thrown with surprising force. Everyone turned. Little Hawk, not even 5 years old, stood there, his small face a mask of fury, another rock already in his hand. The distraction was all Jacob needed. He lunged forward under Kale's guard and drove his shoulder hard into the warrior's chest. They crashed to the ground. Jacob brought the hilt of his knife down hard on Kyle's temple. The warrior went limp. It was over. Jacob stood, breathing heavily, his arm dripping blood onto the ground. He had won. He had survived, but as he looked at Kale's unconscious form, he saw something that made his victory feel hollow. Tucked into Kale's belt was a small, intricately beaded pouch. It was not Apache. It was the kind of pouch the settlers at the Sutton Ranch carried for their gold dust. Jacob ripped it from Kale's belt and threw it at Black Eagle's feet. "He is not one of you," Jacob said, his voice raw. "He's working for them, for the Suttons." The truth hit the tribe like a physical blow. Kale was a traitor. He had killed his own people, tried to start a war, all for a pouch of gold. The real enemy wasn't Jacob. It was the greed that was poisoning the entire valley, and that enemy was still out there. Black Eagle looked at Jacob, his face filled with a new profound respect. "You have fought not just for your life," he said, "but for the truth. You have the heart of a warrior." Naya rushed to Jacob's side, tearing a strip from her own dress to bind his wounded arm. Her touch was gentle, her eyes full of a gratitude that went deeper than words. But their relief was short-lived. A scout came riding into camp, his horse lathered in sweat. "The Suttons," he gasped. "They are coming, a dozen men. They know Kale has failed. They are coming to finish the job themselves." The final battle was at hand. They didn't have much time. The Sutton gang was riding hard. Black Eagle looked at his warriors. They were strong, but they were outnumbered. The Suttons had repeating rifles. It would be a slaughter. "We cannot fight them here," the chief said. "They will use their rifles to pick us off from the ridge." Jacob looked around. His small cabin was a death trap. But he knew this land, every rock, every gully. "There's a place," he said, "a narrow canyon, 2 miles east. They'll have to come through it single file. It'll take their numbers away from them." It was a desperate plan, but it was the only one they had. The warriors moved out, taking Naya and Little Hawk with them to safety. Jacob stayed behind. He had one last trick up his sleeve. He spent the next hour rigging his cabin. A few sticks of dynamite left over from clearing stumps. A long fuse. He was turning his home into a weapon. As he finished, he saw the first riders of the Sutton gang appear on the ridge. It was time. He lit the fuse, leaped onto his horse, and rode like the devil was chasing him. He reached the canyon just as the first warriors were getting into position. He could hear the Sutton gang behind him, whooping and hollering, thinking he was running scared. Then a thunderous explosion shook the entire valley. The cabin erupted in a ball of fire and smoke. The blast startled the Suttons' horses, throwing them into confusion. It bought the warriors precious seconds. The battle for the canyon was a brutal, close-quarters fight. Arrows flew, rifles cracked, the air filled with the sounds of battle. Jacob fought alongside Black Eagle, no longer a rancher, but a man defending his own. They were holding their ground, but just barely. Then Jacob saw him. Silas Sutton, the leader of the gang, had found a way around the main fight. He was making his way up a side trail, a trail that would put him right above Naya and the other women and children. Without a word, Jacob broke off from the fight and went after him. The two men met on a narrow ledge overlooking the canyon. The wind howled around them. "You should have just walked away, rancher," Sutton snarled, raising his rifle. "It's my home you're trying to burn," Jacob shot back. Sutton fired. The bullet grazed Jacob's cheek, a hot, searing pain. Jacob lunged, tackling Sutton. The two men rolled on the narrow ledge, locked in a desperate struggle. Below, the battle raged on. But up here, it was just two men, fighting for the soul of the valley. Sutton was bigger, stronger. He forced Jacob to the edge of the cliff. For a moment, Jacob saw nothing but the long fall below. This was it. But then, an arrow hissed through the air and buried itself in Sutton's shoulder. He screamed, his grip loosening. Jacob looked up. On a rock above them stood Naya. She held a bow in her hand, another arrow already knocked. Her face was a mask of fierce determination. She had not run. She had stayed to fight. With a final desperate shove, Jacob sent Sutton screaming over the edge. The fall was long. The battle was over. The remaining Sutton men, seeing their leader fall, broke and fled. Silence descended on the canyon, broken only by the cry of the wind. Jacob stood on the ledge, his body battered, his face bleeding. He looked at Naya, and she looked at him. In that moment, they both knew. This was more than gratitude. This was something else entirely. They had saved each other. The valley was quiet in the weeks that followed. The Sutton Ranch was broken, its power shattered. The law, slow but sure, finally came and cleaned up the mess. The tribe stayed, making their winter camp in the valley near the river. Near Jacob, he and Black Eagle rebuilt the cabin, bigger this time. The warriors helped, their hands skilled with axe and wood. It was no longer the home of a lonely man. It was the heart of a community. Naya and Jacob spent their days together, the silence between them filled with a comfortable understanding. They didn't need words. They had seen each other's hearts. One evening, as they sat on the porch of the new cabin, watching Little Hawk chase fireflies, Naya spoke. "You have a place here," she said softly, "among us." Jacob looked at her, at the strength and beauty that had called to him from the first moment he saw her. He thought of his old life, of the ghosts he had run from. They were finally quiet. "My home is here," he said, his voice rough with an emotion he hadn't felt in years. He reached out and took her hand. "With you." They were from two different worlds. He was a white rancher. She was the daughter of an Apache chief. Nothing about it was simple. But as they looked out at the peaceful valley, at the two peoples learning to live together, they knew it was right. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't the easy ones. They are the ones that are fought for, the ones that are earned, the ones that have the power to not just change two lives, but to heal a broken world. What did you think of Jacob's incredible journey? Let us know in the comments below. If this story of courage and unexpected love moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe. We've got a lot more stories from the untamed heart of the frontier coming your way. Thanks for watching.